you looking to create beautiful cards to gift this Christmas season? Today I'm sharing with you not just one, but 3 different card designs that I've been working on over the last few months. What I love about these designs is that they are dimensional, but they still lay flat, and they're actually really easy to create. So before we start creating these beautiful cards, stay to the end of the video. There I will be sharing with you some different papers I've used, different embellishments I've used to create these beautiful cards. So you'll be able to see how versatile these card designs are. So let's get started. So the first card we're going to be doing is what's called a Z-fold or a Z-fold card, depending on where you're from. And I am going to want to take my piece of 8.5 by 1100 pound cardstock, and I want to trim it to 6 inches by 9 inches. So the easiest way to do this is take it in a landscape mode. You want to put in your paper cutter, and if you don't have a paper cutter, these Fiskars ones are great. They also have a lifetime warranty, which is awesome. And I want to cut it to 9 inches. Then we want to flip it, and we want to cut it at 6 inches. Okay. And then this is where we're going to have to take a second piece of paper and cut another section by 3 inches. If you end up having 12 by 12 paper, this would mean you'd have to have less cuts. So we're doing 3 inches wide by 9 inches long. So you end up with 2 pieces of paper. You end up with a larger one and a smaller one. And so they're all going to be 9 inches in width. And we have one that's 3 inches in height, another one that is 6 inches in height. Then from here, we need to either fold or score. This is where our scoreboard comes in really handy, because we're going to be adding more than one score to this, and they need to be evenly placed. So by being able to use a scoreboard, this helps you always get a really even score really quickly and an even fold. So I'm scoring at 3 inches and at 6 inches. And this next one, I'm going to be doing it as well at 3 inches and also at 6 inches. Okay, so we have 2 pieces of paper. They are both scored in the same way. Both at 3 and 6 inches. Up with a piece of paper, and this one's already been folded, but I want to show you how to fold it properly. So the idea is that you take one section and you fold it away from you, you flip it, and then fold over. And so what you're going to end up with is a mountain fold and a valley fold. So we have a mountain and a valley. Okay? And so that's what your piece of paper is going to look like. Then you want to do this one in the same way. So again, fold towards you, flip, fold away from you. So all you need to do is basically have a Z pattern or a Z pattern fold. And these ones should fit into each other, like so. So before I can start decorating this, I need to decide on some paper that I want to use, some ephemera I want to use. And what I'm using today is day 1 to 13 of the Simply Stated Designs Advent Calendar. So there's a couple projects in there that you won't see here, but this is all the ephemera that I was given as part of the day 1 to 13. And if you want to see the unboxing of that advent calendar, make sure that you look at the description below. I have it there. But also there's just so many different ideas. There's also some extra, I love these borders, but I don't think I'm going to use these today. I just think that I want to use those for another project. They do have these beautiful wreaths that I'm also not going to use because the scale isn't right, but I also do have some beautiful papers. So these are going to be the base of my projects, and you can see that between the 6 by 6 sizes and the other sizes, I have lots of options for where I want to go on my project today. So to start with, let's choose some paper. I love this big one, but I'm like, I think the scale's too big for what I want for my card. But I love the different options I have. Oh, it's going to be hard to choose. I think I want, though, for this one, I'm going to start with the plaid. I think for the Z-fold card, that's going to look really nice. And I'm going to be going a little bit differently here, where I'm going to have all 3 panels the same on the back, and then all 3 panels in front using the same cardstock. If you are less particular than I am, and you don't really care, then you can always use different colors for each panel. I just prefer to have it a lot more consistent that way, but that's just me. I do have a 6 by 9 piece of paper, but the reality is I'm going to want to have my blocks be a little bit inside and have a little bit of a white border on them. So instead of cutting to 6, I'm going to cut to 5 3/4. And this will make a lot more sense when we start decorating this. So I cut to 5 3/4 because what that means is now we're going to go here, or you're going to notice that you're going to have a little bit of white space around those edges. And that's great because that's really what we're looking for. We want to frame that. I just find that the papers look so much better when they're framed slightly. Okay, and so then every section here is actually going to be 3 inches. But I don't want to cut them to 3 inches. I want to cut them a little bit smaller. So I'm going to cut them to 2 3/4. So what that's going to give us is we're going to end up with a nice little border around our piece of paper. And if you feel like that's too much white, you could always cut it in half. So instead of doing a 3/4, you could do 2 7/8 inches, and then you would end up with a 1/16 of an inch. But then you better be pretty handy and pretty square so that you end up with a really nice border. This gives you a little bit more of freedom where if you don't get it perfectly centered or squared, you're still going to have it look generally pretty good. And so for some reason, my paper cutter is not working very well today and getting burrs. If you run into burrs, just use a sanding block. That's going to get rid of those little bits and pieces. Now that we have our 3 pieces of paper, then all we need to do is basically attach them on. This is where you could go crazy with some ink blending on the edges. You could highlight some things on these. You could alter the color. I usually do a lot of that, but today I just wanted to keep it to a really simple card design. So again, we're just basically just adding our pieces of paper, squaring them up as well as we can, using the scrapbooking adhesives by 3M. It's good because if you don't get it perfect, you can usually lift it. I usually like using Sukweing tape, but once you put it down, it is not lifting. So if you are new to card making, I would use more of an adhesive like the scrapbooking adhesives, which again, I have in the comments below. You can see what I'm talking about, and they're a really good choice for this type of stuff. So if you don't love the white, use red, use green, use whatever color you want. It really is up to you what you want these cards to look like. The big thing about it is I like the white because it just helps the color stand out a little bit more. So you can see I've done that first layer. I think it looks great. Now we have to worry about our second one. It's going to be laying on top here, but there's going to be some staggering. So the question is, what piece of paper do I want to use next? We still need to stick to a larger piece because we are looking at, again, 3 by 9. I'm going to use the bubble paper here because I think this is going to look great. The question is, do I want more of the red beige or more of the green? I think I'm going to go more with the green. I particularly like this section because of the amount of detail. That's going to look really good on my card. So I'm going to be doing it 2 3/4 because, again, the 2 3/4 is going to allow me to have a little bit of a border. And then we want to cut this paper again 2 3/4 again. Because what that will do is that's going to give me a nice little square that's going to fit nicely into that piece. And again, I'm doing all of these 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. And then you could also make the choice here. Do you want to line them up? Do you want to mix them up? I don't mind the idea that they're lined up a bit. There we go. So now we need to think about how it's going to fit into our card. So we want to make sure we add it on the right side. So we want to make sure it's still following that same curve. So you want to have a mountain and a valley. And you want to be sure you're on this side. You don't want to have it the wrong way. So then we can put our pieces like that. That's the one thing with this one is you got to make sure that you put your papers on the right side. When I was teaching this last time, I had people going like, oh, I put it here. And I'm like, that's the wrong side of the paper, guys. And so it was a funny thing because it's so easy to get confused. So it's good to check in and make sure that everything's on in the way that you want it so that if you get confused, it's not going to be the end of the world. So I always check twice and then glue once. So we do want to have a little bit of a gap in there, right? So the question of how much of a gap you have is, do you have it further out? That's going to create a bigger gap. If you have it further in, it's going to create a smaller gap. So just be aware of that. You can also decide if you want the top, middle, or bottom. I like having them middle to a tiny bit, maybe to the top. I like to try to have things a little off center. And so I'm just going to be adding like 2 little strips of adhesive there. And so I like to close the card, and I like to take this piece and put it on top. So I'm just going to eke it a little bit up and just pretty much at center, maybe a little bit past. So then that's going to give me a nice big spot there. But how do I make sure I glue this on properly so that you don't have it be uneven and that it stays flat for shipping? So all we need to do, you have your piece of paper, it's in there, you close it with the other piece of paper inside of it. You flip it. You put your fingers there so you know how far your glue needs to go, and you add in a couple pieces there. Flip it over. Ta-da! Now what you run into is like, now that's not going to move. It's going to be in a great place. You're not going to have to worry about it. And now it's always going to lay perfectly flat. If you try to do this without actually folding the card, flipping it over, you're always going to have it that it's going to be a little bit bulgy, a little bit weird. So keep it simple. Just flip it, glue it, and then you're good to go. So I have so much different ephemera. So the nice thing about all these patterns is that they all work together. So I'm just choosing a few images. And one thing I like to do is if I'm going to add in thickness or pop dots or anything like that, it's going to be on the first one, because then that means that everything else is going to lie really flat. So these other two, I'm not going to have a lot of dimension. This one I will though. I like to always have a spot for a greeting. You could stamp on this. You could do whatever you want on this. In this case, I'm just leaving it open. It's going to be 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. This is just a little piece that I had left over from my scraps from cutting these cards. And so I'm just going to be adding it just straight on there. And then again, I never like leaving something just blank like that. So because this part we want to have nice and flat so the card closes properly, I'm just going to add this little gift here. And so you'll see that I have it overlapping, but I do not have it in the fold. You want to make sure that you have nothing in the fold. If you have it in the fold, it's going to get squished. It's not going to work really well. And I love these little mistletoe. I thought this was great, but you don't have to just add in one piece. You could add a piece like so. And then I'm going to add these bells on top. And again, I'm not going to have a lot of dimension with this, just so that this card closes really nicely. And the more dimension that you have in a card, the more it's going to cost to ship. So that's one thing to be aware of when you are choosing your designs, is how much do you want to pay for shipping? Because if it gets over a certain thickness, the post office will charge you more for it. But those are my first two spots. Because I made this higher up, I thought it'd be nice to be able to add something that kind of connects both the background to the foreground and still have it look really good. And again, because this lays flat, even if you have it like that, it's going to sit really nicely. And that looks really nice in an envelope as well. So with this one, I am going to pop this up a little bit. I like, again, the scrapbooking adhesives by 3L. They have a whole bunch of different types. They have little squares, they have little circles, they have lots of things that work really well. And you can get them in half height and full height ones as well too. So this is like a full height thickness. There's other ones that are half height that work just as well. And I like having a little bit of extra adhesive. Some people are like, I just use one. I'm like, I like having a few more than that on my pieces. So that's going to have a little bit of dimension, which I think is just going to add like a little bit of just a nice little touch to this card. And then we're just going to add it there. There we go. I think I'm going to go all in with the height on these ones. We add in our little Christmas bulb. I didn't want to just leave it like that. I like adding in a little more layers where I can. And again, because Simply Stated just gives you so much ephemera in a package, it's almost like I have so many images, I'd better use them somewhere. And then this piece here, I do want it to sit on there, but that means I need to have this part with adhesive and this part with a foam dot. And I like, again, using the dry adhesive just because it just helps things move forward really quickly. So look at that. We have a gorgeous card and it's fully completed, and that did not take us long to do. And all the colors work beautifully together. Okay, so let's move on to the second card. So before we move on to cards 2 and 3, let's talk about who's sponsoring the video this week. And that would be me. This week, I decided I would share with you a new course I have coming out between Christmas and New Year's. And that is a course about creating a mixed media canvas about your yearly intention. And so with this one, I'm going to be providing a lot of interesting techniques in one project. This is one that you could actually take half the techniques and do a completely different project, use another half to do other things, and I'll be breaking down all the techniques. So if you find this is really complicated, you can break it down to something a little bit more simple. If you want to go all in and you want to add 8 layers, you can have your 8 layers. So this is something that I wanted to do just to push myself and also maybe to push you if you're interested in mixed media, but you're not too sure how all the layers work together. But more importantly, we're going to be talking about intention and about goal setting and about how we can make our next year the best. With the course, you'll be getting an ebook. You'll be able to work through some of the exercises. I'll be sharing a lot of information about that along with this project. It's going to be a really valuable course, especially if you want to start out your new year in the best way possible. So make sure to sign up for my newsletter. The link is below, and that will let you know when this course comes out. It will also give you access to other free printables. It's going to give you access to a lot of encouragement, and you'll be the first person to know about my new content, about all the other things that I'm doing. And it's a way I love to connect with you guys just a little bit more authentically. And as always, please like and subscribe to this channel. And just every time you like this video, that just helps more people see it. That helps my channel grow. So thank you so much for your support. So let's get started on cards 2 and 3. So this next card is an easel card, and I'm using a 12 by 12 piece of paper. We want to use this to create a 5 by 7 easel card. So that's why we need the 12 inches. If you're moving to a smaller size, it wouldn't really matter as much, but if you want a 5 by 7, you want to use the measurements that I'm sharing with you today. You want to have a piece of paper that is 12 inches by 4 3/4. So we take our 12-inch piece of paper and we cut it at 4 3/4. Then I'm flipping my paper. So I'm trying to make sure that I have as much left over as I can for other projects. So this next one's going to be again 4 3/4. But we want to cut it to 6 inches. So with 2 pieces of paper, we have one that's 12 inches by 4 3/4, another one that is 4 3/4 by 6. So after you cut those, then the next thing to do is score. So some trimmers, you can actually get a scoring blade for your trimmer. And so if you don't want to get a separate scoring board, that's also a really great option. I just happen to have a couple of these because I make enough books and other projects that I find having one is really handy. We are going to take our 12-inch piece of paper and we're going to score at 3 1/4 and then do another score at 6 inches. And that's it for this card. And again, you could always take a pencil and a ruler and make a little mark and fold. And it does work. It's just a little bit more time consuming. So we have a piece of paper that has the scores at one end, and then we have a long flat piece. So that long flat piece, you just want to fold over. So you basically have a 5 by 7 card, but it has these little scores on the top. So then what you want to do is you want to fold this one in, which might seem strange because it's going to go past that half mark, right? But what we're looking to create is a C. So this C shape, to create your easel, you want to have it look like that. That's why we want the C shape. This is the bottom of the card. This is going to be the top of the card. And it might seem kind of confusing, but don't worry about that for right now. It's going to make a lot more sense. So this little top piece here, we're just going to flip it down like this. And we're going to take our adhesive. I'm just using a dry adhesive today just because it's fast. You can also use art glitter glue. You can use whatever you have on hand. We're just going for fast and easy today. Now I'm adding the piece of paper on top. And so stick with me here. Now what we have is we now have an easel card. So by adding in the paper to the bottom there, what you have is now you have a card that lays completely flat. And now you can basically get it to sit like an easel. So this one I'm going to show you one that is really layered. This is where we can go crazy with the embellishments. Yes, you will be paying extra postage for this, but as long as you don't care, I don't care, and it's all good. So our card back here is 4 3/4 by 6. So sorry, I said earlier 5 by 7, but we're really doing a 4 3/4 by 6 inch card. I always get my measurements mixed up, even when I'm trying not to. So I like to create a little bit of a border on these ones. So we're not going to go 4 3/4. We're going to go 4 5/8. Might seem like a really weird measurement. We're just going to have a really small 1/16 of an inch border on that. And then we're doing 6, so instead we're going to bring it down to 6 7/8. And so with this one, we're going to add it straight onto our paper. So I tend to ink a lot of things that I'm going to not have as many layers on. When you have lots of layers, the paper itself can be those layers that you need. So we've added our adhesive on. You can decide which direction we want our paper. You're only going to see the edges of it, so don't be too worried about it. This is where I could have created a frame, but I have lots of paper, so I'm just going to use a lot of paper. So now that I've added that on, now I have to choose what I want to do next. So I took one of the 6x6 pieces and I cut to 5.5 by 4 1/4. And so that's going to sit really nicely in there, and you're going to have that nice red border, but that also coordinates really beautifully with it. And that's just a really stunning piece. It's going to add that on. And look how nice that looks. So you could really just leave it there, like how stunning that paper is. But this is also where you could decide whether or not you want to come in with some other embellishments, or if you even just want to add in a little circle like this, and maybe like jingle all the way. And then, you know, let's see what else we got that we could add in, because we don't really want to take away from this. Like that really is the focal piece, because I just love that paper. And what I should have done actually is pop it up. That was what my plan was. And then I just went ahead and put it down flat. That's okay. It'll be okay flat. I just would have looked a little bit better popped up, because then it just has more dimension. And so this is kind of where you start playing, right? Like have lots of bits and pieces. And that's what's really fun about it, is now we can bring in pieces and see kind of how it looks, or see if it creates a look that we love or don't love. It really kind of comes down to what you're looking for. So now with those ones, and now if we put jingle all the way, I just want them to be touching, because if they're touching, then it really feels like everything is connected. I like the Oh Holy Night a little bit better. I wish I had a larger sentiment, but I do like these ones that she's included. I just don't know, a lot of my ephemera is a little bit too big for the size of card we're doing here. And I don't really want to add in a present, because that doesn't really work either. So sometimes it takes almost more time to figure out your ephemera than almost anything else. And oh, I have a couple more collections here that I had forgotten about that I got to pull out. Okay, here we have some little florals and little pieces. Now this should help, because this now works a little bit better with already what I have going on. There we go, that's better. So something like that, or maybe we just go with the poinsettia over top of that one. There we go. See, that's getting better. Sometimes you just got to play around and find out like the right images that's going to make it really work for you, and then just run with it. So fussing aside, I really wanted to show you my process so that you're aware of what I'm trying to think about when I'm creating, because it's so easy to go, well, how did you end up where you are? A lot of it is figuring out, well, what do we need to do to make sure we end up with a look that we're looking for, right? And so look at how much dimension you got there. That's a lot of dimension, and I would have had more with that on top. Okay, so now we have that, but now we need to do the bottom part. And this is where I could basically come in with the same paper that I put on top. And it's almost nice in some cases to leave a little bit of white space there. I think that's going to look really, really good. So yes, I'm not just cranking out the cards for you, showing how to quickly put things together. Part of that is because I do want you to understand some of the thought that goes into it. Because the hardest part about card making is figuring out how you add your layers. How do you build the stuff up in a way that does feel really nice and really good? And because I had cut that other one to be 1/16 of an inch around, I'm doing the same thing here. Those will match, which is kind of where I wanted to go with this today. So our easel card, technically, it would kind of stay open, but the best way to keep this thing open is by adding in an image and adding some ephemera around it to hold it in place. And this is where you could actually put your Christmas message out, and so that it could be seen while the thing is open. But I think the key with this for me is not having it on these really delicate pieces. It's having it in a way that it's not going to damage your image. I need to think about where I want it to sit. Because if I want to sit here, then I want to make sure I have ones right at the edge here. So this way, if the paper bends slightly, you're still going to be able to work with it. And you could just have it with just the one pop dotted image. But I think I want to do a little bit more than that. Well, we have this guy here. And that works with what we've already done on the front page. And then this is where we could actually bring this other one over top as well too. So what we're going to do is start by putting this one down. Not putting as much adhesive on it because it doesn't really need it. Then we're going to put this one down. So that's going to hold up our easel. And then I think we're just going to add that on top. So you have your second cards. Again, this one has a lot. Sorry, I have so much stuff. My space getting smaller. This is how I create in my actual studio as well. I find that I start with a large space and then by the end I'm like, I'm working with like 3 inches. Okay, so there we go. So we ended up having a dimensional front. Again, I could have had even more dimension. And then we open it and you have this beautiful layout. So you have a spot to write your personal message. And the nice thing too is now when it's popped up, people can see that personal message. And now because of the way this is, you are not going to have to worry about that moving. It's going to stay upright and it's going to stay really nice and solid. But the nice thing is it's still a fairly flat card. You might have to pay a tiny bit more in mailing for it, but it will lay flat enough for you to ship. So, ta-da! So this next card, which I call a belly band fold card, because I don't know what else to call it. Basically, we have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. We are trying to create a card that is 5.5 by 11 inches. Because we already have an 11-inch piece of paper, all we're doing is making one cut at 5.5. And then we want to take a second piece of paper. So we'll cut this down to 1.25 inches by 10 inches. So we just take that along there. And we cut it down. Okay, so take our 5.5 by 11-inch piece of paper. We want to score this at 1.25, 5.5, and 9.25. First of all, we want to do that center fold. That center fold is going to get you a piece of paper that basically it's going to be perfectly even in the center. But you'll notice that we have one that has a larger area with a score and a smaller area with a score. The key with this is you want to take the larger area with the score and you want to bend it back. Then you take that smaller area with the score and you bend it on top. So it might feel a little bit counterintuitive. This is where most people get a little confused. So again, just to repeat, we have it at half and you have one with a larger score and a smaller score. You want the larger score bent backwards and then the smaller score sits on top. So now you get a card that has an overlap, but it actually has 2 separate flaps here. And then you open it like so. All right. And then with the belly band, we're going to add this after we decorate it. So make sure that you stay till the end of this section to understand how you can add it onto your project. You want to have it so that both of the folds are open on the left-hand side. So you have the large fold, the small fold, and it opens up like this. This is going to be a larger area. This is going to be a smaller area. So let's start by decorating the inside of the card. So right now we have a spot that is a 3.25 by 5.5 inches. I'm going to take a piece here and I've cut it to 3.5 by 5.25. So that's going to fit nicely in there with a nice little border around it. And we're putting it here. And I'll give you some of the method to my madness in a little bit. Oh, I think I want to actually have it this way. The pieces that I chose for the inside here aren't going to be perfectly matched, and that's okay. I have specifically decided that they were different parts of the same paper because I thought this piece here was fabulous, and I didn't really want to have it exactly matchy-matchy. But I thought I'd leave the green both at the top. That gives a little bit more of a sense of maybe cohesion. I don't know. I just like how it looks. And that can be enough. I sometimes think we can overthink some of this stuff, where sometimes it's like, choose your favorite papers, do what you want. If it makes you happy, that's good enough. And someone's just going to be so happy to get something handmade from you. Whether or not it's perfectly matchy or not, they really don't care. Let's be honest. And then on this piece here, I am going to be putting in, this should be a 1.5 inch piece. Yeah, 1.5 inches. Again, by 5.25. Because we want to try to have everything around the same height. And I'm just going to be adding that here. I'm just trying to make sure that everything is generally lined up pretty well. So on this side, I'm also doing another piece of plaid paper. Adding that in. Add it to this side. Make sure it lines up nicely. Ta-da! And now when we have it closed, it's going to look like that. Now we need to decide what we want to do on the outside here. So I already did add tape to this piece of paper. We're going to add it on top. So just want to have a slightly different pattern. Okay, and then we want to open it like this. And now we have another spot here and another spot here. So I'm going to be adding in this piece, and I think I want to add it with the green again on the top. And the dimensions of this piece is 3.5 by 5.25 again. So you're going to have two pieces that are 3.5 by 5.25, and then this one's going to be a little bit bigger at 4 by 5.25. This is 1.5 inches by 5.25, 1 inch by 5.25. We bring it all in. That's another 1 inch by 5.25. And then this is the question: is do you want to have a piece here? Depends if you care or not. Just in case someone flips it open this way, then you know it can look pretty. So maybe we'll just add in another piece of that. Yeah, that looks good. And I think that's, again, that's the other 1.5 inches by 5.25. And again, if you want to actually see all the measurements in one place, check out my website. I do have a link in the video description below, and that will allow you to have kind of a Coles Notes version of the whole thing. So there we go. We have 3 different patterns. And again, you could make the choice to have these all be the same. It really comes down to your personal preference. You open it up, you have something that looks like that. Now from here, how are we going to decorate it? Again, as always, I like to create an area that I have a sentiment or a place to write. So I'm going to create a piece that's 3 inches by 4 3/4. Might like seem like a strange size, but once we add it in here, what I really wanted to do was have a larger border. And I also want to have a place where I could actually put embellishments or other things on it as well too. So I'm just going to add that straight on. But I think it's really good to have a spot that you can write, that you can, write down your thoughts, write down that greeting, make this a little bit more personal. Okay, so let's decide what we want for imagery on this one. I have these cute little elves, I have Santa, I have all these little cute little houses. I had a whole bunch of different houses and little trains. Ooh, that train's actually really cute too. So how do we make ourselves a scene that looks really kind of cute and really fun? So I thought we would start with Santa at the front, but you know, he looks pretty good, and you could leave it there, but I'm like, well, let's try to create a scene. So he's bigger, so that makes him more in the foreground. And so this is something you need to be aware of when you're making cards, is think a little bit about scale. So Santa's big because he's close up. The elves are a little bit farther away because they're a little bit smaller. And again, as long as we stay away from those folds and away from the edges of the card, you can really do make that work. And so then I wanted to throw in one more image, because what, 2's okay, and it's nice little grouping, but I thought, well, let's throw in another little Christmas tree in behind there. That way it feels like they're in a little bit of a scene, but again, Santa's front. And so I'm trying to decide, do I want this little guy or do I want this one? This is going to take up more space on my card, but I love the little train. Like, look how cute that is. So what I'm going to do is still have lots of room to write, but still going to look really, really nice. So now I'm going to add in these onto my card. And I was mentioning that they had full-size foam dots. You also have these little half-size guys. And so these ones are a lot thinner, where we have a really thick. If you just even look at the style here, it's a little hard to see on camera. That's a really thick, full-sized foam square or a circle. This one's a little half-sized one. So this is a way that if you want to still try to create a little bit of lift, but you're trying not to have too much thickness in the center of your card, this is a really nice way you can go about it. It does have some thickness, but the nice thing is the way this card folds is there's room for that thickness. That's why we're doing the belly band last. If you do it first and you wrap it around without all of this thickness figured out, it's going to break. So that's why we always want to leave it till the last. So the hard thing about the way this card front is you have a small area and then you have the overlap. The question is, do you care if some of your imagery gets covered a bit? I'm making the choice to say no, that I don't. Because in that case, what I can do is I can add in, again, another tree, another little village. Let's see, we just move this all up a little bit. I don't want them quite touching the edges, but pretty close. So you also don't want everything lined up perfectly in a row. So I'm going to have the tree in a little bit. And the warm wishes just kind of touching it there. You kind of want to have them touching enough that it feels like it's all part of one scene. And then I'm going to put the warm wishes here. And my key with this is if I can do it correctly, you should still be able to read the warm wishes. You should be able to see some of it. It still looks cool. And then once you remove that belly band that we're going to put in, you're going to be able to see the whole thing. But it still looks pretty good. So that's all of our layers without the belly band. What I'm going to start with is adding in a piece of cardstock to my belly band. So I think maybe we'll do that one because I have a lot of this pattern already. So let's go to this one. And so this one we have the belly band. We have 1.25 inches. So we're going to cut that down to 1 inch. So I have a 1 inch wide piece, and this is actually by 9.5, which is a little short for what we want to do, but bear with me. The reason it's 10 inches is to give it a little bit of room for overlap. So what I'm going to worry about is having one area where it's really balanced and another area where I really don't care. So this will make a lot more sense when I add it to my piece of paper. So you'll notice I do have an area here that's a tiny bit short, but don't worry about it. So now when we add this belly band, we want to keep our thickness in mind. So I'm going to look at this from the perspective of I want this to be fairly loose. So you do want to curve it around, but I always try to leave like a little bit of space. It's a little hard to see, but basically if I ran my hand along the card, I'd get caught on that little edge. And you want that because what that means is that when we go to actually glue this together, it's going to move because you want it to move freely and hopefully not catch on too much of your ephemera, which was maybe a reason I shouldn't have put so much bulky ephemera. It's probably going to catch a little bit, but I'm okay with that for now. But again, if you're particular about that, then just use lots of glue and keep it really flat, and then you don't have any worries about that. So I basically, now that I had kind of test fit it, I'm rubbing that to hold it in place. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of tape here. And now I'm going to close that over. It doesn't look bad, but you can still see a little bit of that white there. And the question is, do you care? I often, what I'll just do is come in and just add another embellishment in its place. So this is where, and have Mr. Santa sitting there. And then that way it doesn't really get in the way or compete with the other embellishments. So now to add this belly band, all you got to do is just flip it over your card. And because you've left lots of space, you're not going to have to worry about tearing your paper. It's going to go over beautifully. And there you go. You're going to end up having a card that, again, it's fairly thick. And you just need to keep that in mind when you're building this kind of card. But I prefer to have it having a little bit more space. And I probably could have done it a little bit tighter than this. But I was really worried about not having it so tight that I couldn't get on and off. So you want to be able to make it move a little bit. So then there you go. So then you have your Santa, you have your warm wishes, you open it up, and you open it like that. And there you go. So now that we finished our 3 cards, I wanted to show you a different take on these. This is a Happy Holidays one that I had done for a water marbling class. And if you're interested in actually seeing how I did all these papers, because these are all hand printed papers, I am going to have that class out probably in the next month or so. So make sure to sign up for my newsletter, and then you'll be the first person to know about when that class comes out. So this one I did with some hand printed papers, some stamped images, and I colored with some markers. So that has a very, very different feel than the one that we just did, which is again, very different colors. So you can see if we can do it in 2 very different styles of the same card. You could use this for Easter, you could use this for birthdays, you could use this for a lot of different things. Another example of this is, again, the easel card. This one was a very flat one. This one I did again with some of that water marbling paper, added in a couple snowflakes, added some stickles. This one I used a half-height foam dot to hold it back. But because the paper was quite light in color, I thought, well, then you could just write on there what you wanted. Again, a very different cry from this one here that has a lot more paper, a lot more embellishments, and a lot more going on. So again, 2 different takes for Christmas cards of the same card. And then lastly, let's talk about our wonderful belly band card. So this one I did it without any extra height for anything. In this case, I actually put the piece on there. Basically, that is a stamped image. I added in my water marbling paper around the edges. And this is a few different samples of the water marbling paper. In this case, I just wanted the image to be seen, whether or not it was open or closed. And then when you open it up, you have a little scene of trees and your snowflake, and again, another spot. Again, very different than what we just created, which has Santa and a whole lot of built up texture in there. And then we also have that. So again, very different look to it. This is very bright because these are the colors that I had to work with the paints I was using. And then this one is done in a lot more muted colors. So again, lots of different takes on the same thing. Thank you for following along with me today. I always love hanging out with you guys online, and I would love to see your comments and hear what's been helpful. If you have any questions, if anything I've said is unclear, just let me know, and that way I can make sure that I can provide any clarification that you need. And check out some of my other card videos. I do have a whole playlist on cards, but check out this one next. This is another one that I really enjoyed making, and I thought you might enjoy too. So I'll see you in the next video.